This wasn't Jasmine Crockett's victory. She never wanted a fight. She just stood for a mother who died waiting for answers, for a boy who died asking a question, and for a chair no one dared to sit in ever again. We don't need titles to speak truth, just the courage to face it. If this story moved you, share it. Not for clicks, but for the truth that should have been told long ago. And for the next Elijah, the next Lena, the next empty chair, waiting to be heard. This story is a work of fiction. It is a dramatized narrative created to explore themes of justice, courage, and truth. Any resemblance to real events or individuals is purely coincidental. The sky over Washington, D.C. was the color of iron. Heavy clouds pressed down on the city like a warning, draping the Capitol in an eerie quiet usually reserved for storms or funerals. Outside the federal courthouse, everything moved as normal. Cars in traffic, coffee cups in hand, tourists snapping photos. But inside, beneath vaulted ceilings and marble corridors, something was different. The hallway leading to room 3B had taken on the kind of stillness that only shows up when people are waiting for something to happen, but don't know what. Security guards stood at rigid attention. Journalists whispered. A few aides shifted nervously. And everyone kept glancing at the clock. It was 8:47 a.m. At the far end of the corridor, footsteps echoed. Deliberate, steady, not rushed, not timid. Jasmine Crockett walked alone. No entourage, no bodyguards, no assistants frantically typing on phones, just her. She wore a plain navy blue suit, the kind that didn't catch attention unless you knew what to look for. And in her right hand, she carried a worn brown leather briefcase. The kind passed down, not bought, scuffed on the corners. The handle darkened from years of use. It didn't say power, it said history. It said work. It said, I don't come from privilege, but I came prepared. People stared, not in admiration, in judgment. A staffer from a right-wing outlet leaned toward her colleague and asked in a low voice, "Is she here to make a scene or surrender quietly?" Another snorted. "She looks like she already lost." But Jasmine didn't react. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead toward the heavy door of room 3B. Her face gave away nothing. Not fear, not anger, not even curiosity. She had been here before. Maybe not this building, not this specific hall, but in rooms like it, where powerful people pretended to listen while waiting for her to fail. She had received the email the night before at 11:38 p.m. No subject line, no explanation, just a one-line message. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Room 3B, 9 a.m. sharp. No attachments, no official signature, no indication of what it was about. She stared at it for 10 minutes, wondering if it was a mistake, a prank, or something worse. But in her gut, she knew. This wasn't an invitation. It was a command. A trap dressed like protocol. A warning cloaked as routine. She didn't ask questions. She packed her briefcase, set her alarm, and got ready. Inside the courtroom, room 3B looked more like a gallery than a legal space. The press was seated along the left, cameras already positioned and red lights blinking softly like heart monitors. On the right side sat several senators, mostly older white men, stone-faced, arms crossed. Some of them had publicly ridiculed her in past hearings. Some had whispered into microphones about her tone, her hair, her audacity. But this morning, none of them were speaking. They were watching, waiting, hoping, perhaps, to see her fall. At the center of the room sat an elevated bench. For now, it was empty. No judge, no clerk, no bailiff. Just silence and the steady hum of air conditioning. Then, quietly, a side door opened, and in walked Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She wasn't wearing her robe. That alone made the room tense. She wore a fitted grey suit, stern, sharp, precise. No assistants, no notes. Just a single sheet of paper in her hand and a polished wooden gavel in the other. She stepped up to the bench without a word. She didn't acknowledge the room. She didn't even look at Jasmine. There was no opening statement, no reading of agenda, no legal framework laid out. She lifted the gavel, tapped it once, soft, controlled, and began. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett," she said, voice cold and clipped, "this court has received intelligence reports indicating that you have knowingly withheld classified files pertaining to Operation Hollow River, placing national security at risk." The words fell heavy, each one like a brick on the chest. She continued, "You are hereby ordered to respond under oath. Failure to comply may constitute contempt of court or treasonous conduct under federal law." The word treason landed like a slap across the face of the room. No one breathed. One of the reporters dropped her pen. A conservative staffer leaned back, grinning smugly, already picturing headlines. Somewhere in the back, a senator whispered, "It's over." The cameras zoomed in fast, hunting for cracks in Jasmine's face. A tremble, a gasp, a tear, but there was nothing. Jasmine just stood there, eyes locked on the judge. She didn't reach for a lawyer. She didn't protest. She didn't even blink, because she understood something the rest of the room hadn't caught up to yet. This wasn't justice. This was spectacle. And if she showed weakness, even for a second, she'd be swallowed whole. So she stood still, calm, silent. The kind of silence that unnerves powerful people because they don't know what it means. And for the first time, Barrett's eyes narrowed, unsure. There was no defense, no denial, just a woman with a briefcase who hadn't yet opened it. And that's when everything began to shift. For a moment, the room didn't move. It didn't breathe. It simply watched. Jasmine Crockett stood at the center of a constitutional ambush, accused of treason in a federal courtroom by one of the most powerful judges in the country. And yet, she remained absolutely still. No objections, no outbursts, not even the twitch of a brow. The reporters waited like vultures, their cameras tightening in, focusing, waiting for something, anything. A crack in the voice, a wobble in the knees, a tremor of fear. But there was none. She didn't speak because she couldn't. She didn't speak because she refused. In rooms like this, silence is survival. Jasmine had learned it years ago, on Capitol Hill, in backroom committees, in televised hearings where white colleagues could raise their voices without consequence, but she had to measure every breath or risk being labelled aggressive. She had learned the hard way that black women in power are expected to be strong but punished the moment they show it. Passion becomes defiance, emotion becomes instability, and silence, only silence, becomes protection. Justice Barrett sensed it. Her voice, which had just moments ago accused someone of betraying the nation, now sounded more practiced than powerful. She had dropped the word treason like a grenade and expected an explosion. But Jasmine didn't explode. She absorbed it. And when a woman absorbs an attack like that without flinching, it makes everyone in the room question who actually holds the power. And then, slowly, deliberately, Jasmine did something no one expected. She reached down, not quickly, not hesitantly, and unlatched the old briefcase she had carried in with her. The sound of the clasp opening was soft but piercing. Reporters leaned forward. Judges straightened in their seats. The kind of hush fell over the room that people only hear in moments of deep instinct, the kind that says something irreversible is about to happen. She didn't pull out documents, not yet. She didn't pull out legal arguments or printed exhibits. She pulled out something small, worn, folded over so many times the paper was beginning to fray at the edges. She held it in her hands like a fragile object. Not because it would break, but because it had survived too much. The cameras caught it, the way her fingers paused just slightly before setting it down on the table. Not projecting it, not holding it up, just placing it, carefully, quietly, like setting a tombstone on the soil where something had been buried for far too long. Then Jasmine looked up, her gaze locked with Barrett's. The air between them seemed to tighten, shrink, pull the entire room into the gravity of that one silent stare. "Are you sure you want this?" she asked. No drama, no elevation in tone, just 5 words that landed heavier than any courtroom declaration. The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a genuine offer, an off-ramp, One last chance for a powerful woman to step back before walking off a cliff. Justice Barrett didn't respond, not with words, but the flicker in her eyes, quick, fleeting, was unmistakable. Doubt. For the first time since she'd taken the bench that morning, her certainty cracked. And she looked, if only for a moment, like someone who suddenly realized she'd picked the wrong fight. But Jasmine didn't wait for permission. She unfolded the letter slowly, as if the paper itself was sacred. The creases told a story, creases made by grief, by memory, by fingers that had traced the same sentences over and over in the middle of the night. This wasn't part of the official record. This wasn't evidence anyone had expected. It wasn't even written by Jasmine herself. But what she held in her hands was truth. She didn't hold it up. She didn't call for a microphone. She just stood. The letter trembled slightly in her grasp, not from fear, but from its weight. And as she began to read the first line aloud, something shifted in the courtroom. The mood no longer felt like a hearing. It felt like a funeral, or a confession. It felt like something sacred was being exhumed, and no one, not even Justice Barrett, was ready for what came next. Jasmine held the letter in both hands, not like a prop, but like something alive. There was no podium, no screens, no projections, just her voice, low and steady, carrying across the courtroom like a prayer spoken at a graveside. "My name is Lena Watkins," she began, "and my son, Elijah, never came home." The sentence landed with a weight that no legal argument could rival. It didn't ask for sympathy. It didn't beg for justice. It simply existed, undeniable, devastating. A few people shifted in their seats, suddenly aware of how loud their own breathing sounded. In the gallery, a man in a dark blazer instinctively reached for a tissue, but stopped, as if unsure whether he had the right to cry. Jasmine read on, her voice becoming the echo of a woman who wasn't in the room, but whose presence filled every corner of it. "They told me it was an accident. They said it happened fast, that he didn't suffer. Then they handed me a flag, folded, polished, heavy, as if that would answer everything I hadn't asked yet. The flag, the ceremonial script, the one-size-fits-all grief the military delivers to families like a package too dangerous to open. They wouldn't say where it happened, or why. They said the report was final, that I shouldn't ask more questions." A long pause followed, not because Jasmine needed to gather herself, but because the words demanded space. In the back row, someone let out a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. A soft, trembling sob broke the silence, just one, but it cracked something wide open. No one turned to look. Everyone knew it could have come from any one of them. "They said my son died serving his country. But when I asked what country sends a boy to a place that doesn't exist on paper, they had no answer." Jasmine lowered the letter for a moment. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. The room had changed. It wasn't a courtroom anymore. It was a witness box for something far older and more sacred than law. Truth. She raised the page again. "Why was he there?" she read. Her voice had no edges, only ache. "Why did he call me 2 days before and say, 'Mama, something doesn't feel right'? Why didn't anyone listen to him when he was still alive?" No one moved. No one coughed. Even the cameras, whirring quietly from their stations, seemed to hesitate. This wasn't coming from a lawyer, not from an elected official, not from a defense team. It was coming from a mother. A woman whose son's name had only appeared in small font footnotes of classified reports, if at all. She didn't ask for anyone to feel sorry for her. She asked one thing, something so unbearably human that it stopped the courtroom cold. "Please, someday, someone tell the truth. Don't let my son be forgotten." Jasmine's voice faltered slightly, but not from weakness, from reverence. She folded the letter slowly, with the care of someone laying a memory back to rest. She didn't hand it over. She didn't submit it to the record. She simply placed it, gently, in front of the judge. And that's when the silence in the room changed. It wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of guilt. It was the silence of every person in that courtroom realizing, in real time, that something deeply wrong had happened. Not in the past, but right here, in their presence, under their watch. Jasmine stepped back, but she didn't sit down, because the letter had just spoken for her, and for a mother who never got the chance. And now, the nation was listening. For a few long seconds, the room sat in stillness, still reeling from the letter. Jasmine didn't rush. She stood quietly beside the table, her hand resting once again on the worn leather briefcase like a patient hand on an old friend. Then, without a word, she unlatched the second buckle. This time, what she pulled out wasn't a folded piece of paper, but a thick grey folder, its corners stiff, its edges marked in red. The kind of folder you only see in military archives or high-security vaults. Across the cover was a bold stamp, TOPC. But it had been slashed with a heavy red line and replaced with another label in bold black type. Declassified, March 11. Gasps rippled through the gallery. A few heads turned instinctively toward one another, confused, even afraid. A defense analyst in the third row leaned forward, as if squinting could stop what was coming next. Jasmine held the folder open. No flourish, no dramatics, just facts. "This is a declassified field dossier from Operation Hollow River," she began, her voice calm but stripped of emotion. "It was obtained through legal oversight protocols under congressional review last month." She turned the first page. Deployment date, September 14th. Executive Security Protocol 887A. Personnel, 12. Fatalities, 3. Then she paused. "Cause of death," she continued, her eyes scanning the document before reading aloud. "Equipment failure, Model A SV7. Tactical rover. Manufacturer, Strat Defense." The courtroom didn't stir, but you could feel it, the weight of each word crashing down like stone on water. Jasmine flipped to the second page. It detailed radio loss, mechanical faults, delayed evacuation response. There were maintenance records marked incomplete. Internal warnings left unacknowledged. And buried inside, written in small black type near the margin of one report. Note: one soldier expressed concerns regarding mission classification 2 days prior to incident. It was Elijah, and they had recorded it, but they hadn't listened. There were no follow-ups, Jasmine said. No disciplinary actions. No oversight. No investigation. She let the words settle into the silence. Because someone didn't want one. Jasmine turned to the final page. Unlike the rest of the dossier, this page was pristine. Unfolded, smooth, and unmistakably formal. At the top, in bureaucratic language, it authorized deployment of the faulty Strat Defense vehicles under emergency expansion of classified field operations. At the bottom, in ink that hadn't faded at all, was the signature. She didn't have to say the name, but she did. Authorization granted by Justice Amy Coney Barrett. The room inhaled, not all at once, but like a wave. 1 second of confusion, then disbelief, then a collective tightening in the chest as people realized what they were staring at. It wasn't the Department of Defense. It wasn't a field commander. It wasn't a military liaison. It was a Supreme Court justice. There was no need to interpret what it meant. It was printed in plain type, in government language, on government paper. And it said that the woman sitting at the highest bench in the courtroom had not only known about the operation, but had signed it into existence. The shame didn't arrive loudly. It crept in, like fog over a lake. Quiet, but impossible to ignore. Someone near the back shifted in their seat. A senator coughed, but it didn't cover the silence. The judge didn't move. Her face no longer carried the authority it had 20 minutes earlier. It looked thinner somehow, grayer, as if the truth had started to age her in real time. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid the final page of the dossier beside Lena's letter on the table. 2 pages, 2 truths, side by side. One handwritten in grief, one typed in power. And suddenly, the courtroom realized those pages didn't contradict each other. They completed each other. And together, they told a story the system had spent years trying to bury. But today, the grave had been opened. Just as the courtroom was beginning to process the dossier, Jasmine reached into her briefcase again. This time, she didn't pull out a folder. She pulled out a photograph, sharp, glossy, high resolution, the kind used in congressional investigations and media exposés. But it wasn't from a war zone. It wasn't from a hearing. It was from a restaurant, a fine dining restaurant in Georgetown. Jasmine held it up just high enough for the cameras to catch it. It showed a private table set for two, crystal glasses glinting under candlelight, a bottle of red wine half empty. In the photo, a woman in a white coat leaned in, laughing mid-sentence, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a man in a charcoal suit. He wore glasses. He had a bald head. He was smiling too. Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Strat Defense CEO Miles Kenner. No documents between them, no briefcases, just a folded menu and a server waiting nearby with a silver tray. In the bottom corner of the photo, stamped neatly by an independent media outlet, was the caption, Georgetown, December 18th. The courtroom recoiled, not because of the image itself, but because of what it meant. December 18th, just 3 days after the military notified Lena Watkins of her son's death. While she was trying to understand how a folded flag replaced a living boy, the architect of his deployment was sipping wine with the man who built the weapon that failed him. And suddenly, every polished word spoken in public hearings, every dismissal of oversight, every missing follow-up, it all began to rot in front of them. Not negligence, not oversight, connection. Jasmine didn't explain. She didn't need to. She simply lowered the photograph and placed it beside the letter and the file. A slow build of evidence, each piece quiet but sharp, like shards of broken glass finally arranged into a mirror. A mirror no one wanted to look into. Until that moment, there had still been whispers of doubt. Maybe Jasmine was misinterpreting data. Maybe it was circumstantial. Maybe she had overstepped, but now there was no maybe left. The story was no longer about whether Jasmine Crockett had betrayed her country. It was about how many people in that courtroom had betrayed theirs, by staying silent, by staying comfortable, by choosing convenience over conscience. The spotlight was no longer on the accused, it was on the audience. Just as the room settled into the weight of its own shame, the back door creaked open. Not the judge's door, not the press entrance, a different one, older, unused. The kind of door you forget even exists until someone walks through it. And in she came, a small woman, hunched, slow-moving, her grey hair pulled into a tight bun at the back of her neck. She wore no black, no veil, no badge of political identity, just a long brick red coat over a cotton dress. She held no phone, no papers, no credentials. Only a cane in one hand and a photograph clutched to her chest in the other. No one had summoned her. No bailiff called her to the stand. But everyone stood still, because somehow they all knew this woman belonged here. Jasmine stepped down from her place without a word and met her halfway. The two locked eyes, no smile, no introduction. Just the kind of nod two women share when they've both lived through something the world has ignored for too long. This was Eleanor Watkins, Lena's mother, Elijah's grandmother. She didn't speak right away. She didn't need to be sworn in. The pain in her back, the quiver in her fingers, that was enough oath for anyone. Then, standing before the same judge who had authorized the mission that killed her grandson, she lifted her head, met Barrett's gaze, and said with a voice cracked but unshakable, "You didn't just bury my grandson. You buried my daughter too." No one moved. No one even blinked, because the line hit harder than any cross-examination, harder than the letter, harder than the file, because it wasn't strategy. It was truth, raw, human, irreversible. Then she held up the photograph. It wasn't official. It wasn't printed from a government database. It was faded at the corners, bent slightly from being carried too long in a coat pocket or wallet. It was a picture of Elijah, not in uniform, not in ceremony, just a 19-year-old boy leaning against the hood of a beat-up car, smiling too wide for the camera. He wore a t-shirt, one shoe untied. The sun was in his eyes. "That's the car he promised to fix for his mama," Eleanor said. He said he'd come back and drive her to church himself. Every Sunday, her voice didn't tremble from age. It cracked because she'd been waiting too long to be heard. He was just a boy, not a machine, not a number. He was hers. And when she lost him, she stopped breathing long before she died. Jasmine gently placed her hand on the woman's back, not to guide her, just to be there, because in that moment, everyone else in the room had vanished. There were no judges, no senators, no cameras, just a grandmother who had buried 2 generations of love and still stood up to tell the truth. And for the first time in the entire hearing, Justice Barrett looked away, not because she was unmoved, but because some truths are too painful to meet in the eye. There was a pause in the courtroom, not procedural, but human. No one knew who would step forward next. The briefcase on the table remained shut. The photograph, the letter, the file, they lay like artifacts of a quiet war. And then, from the gallery, a woman stood, Susan Wallace. Her uniform was pressed, but her face bore the years. She had the look of someone who had held too many hands as life slipped away. She didn't carry anything. She didn't ask for permission. She just walked to the front, nodded once at Jasmine, and turned to the room with eyes that had seen things no one ever puts in reports. "I don't have documents," she said. "I don't have clearance or chain of command orders. I just have a memory, one I never got to share." She steadied herself, breathing in through her nose like a soldier before a storm. "Elijah Watkins came through my emergency unit after the explosion," she began, voice low. "They told us it was already over, that the protocol was containment only, that we weren't to ask questions." She gripped the sides of the witness stand. But he was alive. He was still alive. For 27 minutes, silence swallowed the courtroom whole. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for pain meds. He didn't even panic. He just kept asking the same question. Over and over, Susan's voice faltered. He kept whispering, "Does my mom know I wasn't supposed to be there?" Somewhere in the crowd, a journalist's recorder stopped. A man lowered his head into his hands. Jasmine said nothing, but her hand was clenched so tightly on the briefcase, her knuckles had gone white. Susan reached into her pocket and pulled out a thin, wrinkled sheet, an unofficial note written by hand. "I wasn't allowed to put this in the file," she said, "but I wrote it anyway, because I knew someday someone would need it." She placed it on the table. Jasmine unfolded it carefully. In faded blue ink, written in firm clinical handwriting, were the words, "Subject conscious." Repeated concerns about deployment validity. It wasn't policy. It wasn't authorized. It was truth. And Jasmine wasn't done. Without a word, she opened the final latch on her briefcase and pulled out a small black USB drive. She held it up for everyone to see. No label, no markings, just a single drive. And then, with the quiet confidence of someone who had been silenced too many times to fear it anymore, she plugged it into the courtroom's central display. The speakers crackled once, then went still. And then it came. The voice. Not from a witness, not from a soldier, but from a recording taken behind the doors, where the public never gets to hear. It was cold, controlled, calculated. "We'll say the soldier broke protocol," the voice said. "That'll kill the story before it begins." It wasn't just any voice. It was Justice Amy Coney Barrett. No one breathed. No one moved. Not even Barrett herself. Because once the truth is heard, it cannot be unheard. It wasn't speculation now. It wasn't about theories or timing or missing documents. The voice was unmistakable. The intent was clear. And in that moment, the courtroom didn't just feel betrayed. It felt haunted. Jasmine stepped forward again. Her face was calm, but it was the calm that comes after a storm has destroyed everything that once held you back. This time, she didn't speak. She simply carried something from the side wall to the center of the courtroom. A chair, wooden, scratched, ordinary. The kind of chair you'd see at a kitchen table in any modest home in America. She placed it right in the middle of the room. The cameras zoomed in, unsure what they were looking at. Then she spoke. "Elijah's grandmother gave me this chair," she said. This was his chair, where he ate breakfast every morning, where he did homework, where he sat before he left for boot camp. She let that sink in. The day before he shipped out, he told his mother, "Don't let anyone sit in my spot. I'll be back." Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. But he never came back. And now the chair sat, unoccupied. But somehow, everyone in the room could feel him there. From the front row, a small boy stood up. No one had noticed him before. His shirt was too big, his pants a little long. He looked no older than 8. But he walked with a strange certainty, as if carrying something too heavy for a child, but too sacred to hand off. He held out a crumpled handkerchief. Inside, wrapped with care, was an old silver medal. "My brother's name was James," he said softly. "He died in the military too. And my mum told me, if I ever met someone who told the truth, really told it, I should give this to them." He looked up at Jasmine. "You did." No one moved. Not a camera, not a judge, not even Barrett. Because nothing in the room could match the weight of that moment. Not even law. 2 days later, the nation waited for a press release. There wasn't one. Instead, Justice Amy Coney Barrett stood alone at a small podium inside a Supreme Court conference room. No robe, no seal, no prepared statements being passed behind her. Just a single page in her hand, and a look that had never been seen on her face before. It was not shame. It was surrender. She stared down at the podium for several seconds before finally speaking. "I used to think it was protocol," she said. "That classified documents were there to protect us. That silence was service." She paused, swallowing hard. "But then I saw a mother die waiting for answers. I saw a child give away the last thing he had left. And I realized there is no law, no job, no loyalty that justifies burying the truth." She looked into the camera, not as a judge, but as a woman stripped of illusion. "I signed. I stayed silent. I allowed it. Not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid to admit I was wrong." And then, without raising her voice, she said what no courtroom, no media outlet, no press secretary had prepared for. "Lena, I'm sorry." She ended the speech without taking questions. She walked off the stage. She didn't file a transition plan. She didn't sit for interviews. She didn't go on television to explain. She simply disappeared from the bench she once held so tightly. And the nation, it didn't cheer. There were no hashtags, no front-page headlines celebrating accountability. There was only silence, the kind that fills a house where a chair sits empty, where a voice no longer echoes down the hall, where the truth has finally been spoken, not with fire, not with rage, but with grief. And somewhere, a mother who once clutched a folded flag finally exhaled.